It's a strange thing, the human face. We think of it as a fixed point, the one thing that tells the world who we are. But for some, it's not a map of their identity, it's a construction site for an identity they're desperately trying to build. And when I first saw the file for this family, for this young woman, that's the first thought that hit me. This wasn't about vanity. This was about a fundamental crisis of self, and the scalpels and needles were just the tools being used to fight a war nobody could see. I've been doing this for a long time. You get a feel for the rhythm of a family's pain. It comes through the phone in the voice of a desperate mother. It's written between the lines of an email from a sister who says she doesn't recognize her own sibling anymore. The words they used were predictable: addicted, obsessed, out of control, body dysmorphia. They had already done their own armchair diagnosis, and they weren't entirely wrong, but they were missing the point. Those are just labels. They're the what, not the why. And if you don't get to the why, you're just spinning your wheels in the mud. My job, as I see it, is to get to the bedrock. What's underneath all that pain and confusion? The young woman, let's call her Anna, to protect her privacy, was 28 years old. The photos in the file were startling, not just because of the dramatic changes, but because of the progression. The first picture, taken about 6 years prior, showed a genuinely lovely girl, natural, vibrant, a light in her eyes. Then, photo by photo, year by year, you could see the architecture of her face begin to shift. A nose a little thinner, lips a little fuller, cheeks higher, a jawline more defined. Each change, on its own, might have been subtle, but taken together, it was like watching someone slowly erase themselves. The light in her eyes was still there, but now it looked more like a glare, a defiance. It was the look of someone who was constantly braced for a fight. Her family, her mother and older sister, were at the end of their rope. They told my producers about the money, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more, on credit cards she'd opened secretly. They talked about her recovery periods, how she'd isolate herself for weeks, emerging with a new feature, looking bruised and swollen, yet talking about it with a kind of manic glee. They were scared for her health, of course. They'd read horror stories about back alley procedures and complications. But more than that, they were mourning the loss of the person they knew. It's like she's being replaced piece by piece. Dr. Phil, her sister said. And we don't know who this new person is, and I don't think she does either. That, right there, was the heart of it. That's the insight that told me this was a story we needed to tackle. This wasn't about a girl who just wanted to be prettier. This was about a girl who had decided on some deep, unconscious level that her original self was fundamentally unacceptable, defective. And she was going to cut away every piece of that original self until nothing was left. Her side of the story, the one she was so adamant about telling, was packaged in the language of modern empowerment. It's my body, my choice. I'm an artist, and my face is the canvas. This makes me feel confident. And what's wrong with that? And listen, I'm the first person to say you've got to be the star of your own life. But confidence isn't something you inject into your lips or implant in your cheeks. Real, authentic self-esteem is an inside job. What she was describing wasn't confidence. It was a temporary relief from the anxiety of not feeling good enough. It's a fix. And just like any other fix, the high wears off, and then you need another one, and each time you have to go a little further to get the same relief. That's not a strategy for success. That's the definition of a destructive pattern. Before I ever sit down on that stage, I need to understand the system. The family is a system, and every person has a role. Anna's role was the problem. The family's role was the worried caregivers. But sometimes those roles get so entrenched that the system itself keeps the problem going. I needed to know what the payoff was for everyone involved. For Anna, the payoff was clear: a temporary escape from her inner critic and a sense of control over her own image. But what about the family? Sometimes having a designated problem child can take the focus off other issues within the family unit. I wasn't saying they were malicious, not at all. Their love was genuine, but I had to look at the whole picture. For now, what I saw was a young woman in a desperate, lonely, and very expensive war with herself, and a family that was watching from the sidelines, throwing life preservers that she refused to grab. She was coming to my stage to defend her choices. I knew my job wasn't to argue with her. It was to hold up a mirror, a real one, and show her the person she couldn't see. To understand a behavior like Anna's, you have to rewind the tape. You don't just wake up one day at 28 and decide to fundamentally re-engineer your face. That's a decision born from 1,000 small cuts over a lifetime. So in the days leading up to the show, my team and I started digging. We spoke at length with her mother, her sister, and of course, with Anna herself. And a picture began to emerge, not of a monster or a narcissist, but of a deeply wounded child who never learned how to heal. The family story was on the surface idyllic. 2 daughters, a loving home, all the advantages. The older sister, Claire, was the star. She was the academic, the responsible one, the one who always did the right thing. Anna was the creative one, the free spirit. Now, you hear those words and they sound lovely, don't they? But in the language of family dynamics, those can be code words. Creative can mean not as smart. Free spirit can mean unreliable or less focused. Claire got praise for her grades, for her achievements. Anna got praise for being cute or funny. Her value was tied to her appearance and her personality from a very young age. There's nothing wrong with being cute or funny, but if that's the only validation you get, you start to believe that's all you are. And looks, as we all know, are a currency with diminishing returns. I asked her mother about Anna's childhood. She described a happy girl, but when I pressed for specifics, a pattern revealed itself. The mother, with all the best intentions, was what I call a fixer. If Anna came home with a drawing that wasn't quite right, her mother would help fix it. If her hair was a mess, she'd fix it. If she scraped her knee, she'd fix it. It comes from a place of love, but the message the child receives isn't, I am love. It's, I am not okay as I am. I need to be fixed. So Anna learned early on that her natural state was something to be improved upon. Is it any wonder she eventually took that message and applied it to her own face with a scalpel? She was just continuing the work her mother had started, trying to fix herself into someone worthy of unconditional approval. Then there was middle school. That's the battlefield, isn't it? That's where our identities are forged in fire. For Anna, it was a particularly cruel time. She had a slightly prominent nose. It wasn't something most people would even notice. But one boy, one day, gave her a nickname. It stuck for a year. She was defined by this one feature that she saw as a flaw. Her family's response? Oh, honey, don't listen to them. You're beautiful. That's what you're supposed to say, right? But what a 13-year-old girl hears is, your pain isn't valid. You're overreacting. They were trying to soothe the symptom, but they never addressed the wound. The wound wasn't the nickname. The wound was the feeling of being publicly shamed and defined by an imperfection. And that feeling festered. When I spoke with Anna on the phone before the taping, she was all bravado. She was polished, articulate, and had an answer for everything. She told me she was in control, that she was making investments in her brand. She used the language of a CEO discussing a corporate strategy. This was her armor. It was a sophisticated intellectual defense against feeling that raw 13-year-old shame. She was trying to outsmart her own pain. I asked her, Anna, let's put aside the brand for a second. Let's talk about you. When you're alone at night and you've washed all the makeup off and you look in the mirror, who do you see? There was a pause, a long one. For the first time, the polished CEO was gone. I heard a small voice, a hesitant one. I see potential, she said. And that was the most honest thing she had said. She didn't see a person. She didn't see herself. She saw a project, a thing to be worked on, a series of flaws that needed to be corrected. Her true self, the girl who liked to draw and had a goofy laugh, had been buried so deep under the potential that she'd lost sight of her entirely. The surgery then became the ultimate tool of control. She couldn't control the boy who called her names. She couldn't control being the creative one instead of the smart one. She couldn't control the subtle, constant message that she needed to be fixed. But she could control this. She could walk into a doctor's office with a photograph and a credit card and say, "Make me this." It was a powerful, tangible way to fight back against a lifetime of feeling powerless. The problem is, she wasn't fighting the bullies or her family's expectations. She was fighting herself. Every procedure wasn't an act of creation, it was an act of demolition. She was tearing down the old house, board by board, hoping to build a mansion, not realizing she was standing in the rubble with no blueprint and no foundation. And the family, standing outside the construction zone, was just yelling, "Stop! You're ruining the house," without ever asking her why she felt the need to tear it down in the first place. A family crisis rarely starts with a bang. It starts with a slow leak, a hairline crack in the foundation that goes unnoticed for years. Then, one day, the pressure builds and the whole thing just gives way. For Anna and her family, the escalation was a textbook case. Their attempts to help, born from love and fear, became the very pressure that accelerated the collapse. They were so focused on stopping the behavior that they became part of the pattern that fueled it. The mother, bless her heart, went into full fixer mode. She started with pleading, tears. "Anna, baby, what are you doing to yourself? You're so beautiful just the way you are." When that didn't work, she moved to bargaining. She offered to pay for a therapist, but the offer was conditional. You have to stop the surgeries. Now, what does that do? It weaponizes the very thing that could help her. It turns therapy into a punishment, a consequence for bad behavior, rather than a tool for self-discovery. Anna, who already felt judged, saw this as just another attempt to control her, to fix her back into the version of herself they were comfortable with. So she refused. The sister, Claire, came at it from a different angle, the angle of logic and reason. She was the smart one, remember? So she did research. She'd ambush Anna with articles about botched procedures, statistics on infection rates, stories of women whose lives were ruined. She'd pull out old photo albums. "Look, Anna, look how happy you were here. This is the real you." What Claire thought was a loving reminder, Anna experienced as a profound invalidation. Every old photo was a testament to the person she was trying to kill off. Claire was essentially holding up a picture of her enemy and telling her to embrace it. It was like telling a prisoner they should be happy in their cell. From Anna's point of view, this wasn't help, it was an ambush. Her family had become the enemy, the critic she had to outwit. So she put up walls so high and so thick, nothing could get through. She became more secretive. She'd get a procedure done and lie about it, saying she was on a short vacation or sick with the flu. The lies created distance. The distance created more suspicion. The suspicion led to more snooping and confrontation from her family. It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of dysfunction. I remember them telling me about Christmas last year. It was supposed to be a time for healing, but it became the final battleground. Anna showed up with her lips freshly injected, swollen and bruised, but she tried to act like nothing was different. The family, of course, couldn't ignore it. The mother started crying at the dinner table. The sister started a quiet, intense argument in the kitchen, hissing, "How could you do this right before Christmas?" And Anna finally blew up. She accused them of being jealous. She said they couldn't stand to see her happy and confident. She threw every defense she had at them, turning their concern into a personal attack on her character. She left in a storm of slammed doors and hurt feelings, and they hadn't spoken for more than a few words since. You see, the more they pushed, the more she pulled away. It's psychological physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. They were trying to pull her back to a version of herself she despised, so she ran twice as fast in the other direction. They were arguing about the what, the surgeries, the money, the lies. I needed them to get to the why, the pain, the feeling of inadequacy, the desperate need for control. They were all talking, but nobody was listening. They were a family of broadcasters, each on their own frequency, transmitting into the void. The final straw, the thing that made the mother finally pick up the phone and call my show, came in the form of a credit card bill. It had been sent to the parents' house by mistake. It was for over $20,000, almost all of it charged to a cosmetic surgery center in another state. The lie was one thing, but the sheer scale of the debt was terrifying. It was concrete proof for them that she was no longer just making choices. She was in the grip of a compulsion that was going to destroy her financially and maybe even physically. For them, it was the ultimate betrayal and the ultimate confirmation of their fears. They were out of options. They had tried pleading, reasoning, and anger. Nothing worked. In their minds, I was the last resort, the nuclear option. So by the time they got to my studio, the battle lines were drawn. They were backstage in separate green rooms, the air thick with anxiety and resentment. The mother and sister were a team, united in their mission to save Anna. And Anna was alone, armed with her well-rehearsed justifications, ready to defend her sovereignty to the very end. They all thought they were coming here for a debate, to have me act as the judge and declare a winner. They didn't understand. I wasn't there to take a side. I was there to tear down the walls between them, even if I had to use a psychological sledgehammer to do it. The moment a guest walks out onto that stage, the air changes. All the pre-interviews, all the research, it all boils down to this. It's no longer theoretical. You have a human being in a profound amount of pain sitting 10 feet away from you. With Anna, the first thing I noticed wasn't her face, which was a mask of practiced neutrality, but her posture. She sat perfectly erect, hands clasped tightly in her lap, a soldier on high alert. She was braced for impact. Her mother and sister, sitting on the other couch, were the opposite. They were leaning forward, their bodies physically pleading, their faces a roadmap of worry and exhaustion. I started slow, I always do. You can't just charge in and start tearing down defenses. That's a rookie mistake. It just makes them build the walls higher. I gave Anna the floor. I let her tell her story, her version of it. Doctor, Phil, this is my life. It's my body. I am creating a version of myself that makes me feel strong, empowered, and beautiful. My family sees it as a disease. I see it as an art form. She was good. She was articulate. She hit all the buzzwords: empowerment, choice, self-love. She was making a compelling case for the prosecution, and her family was the defendant. She accused them of being controlling, of being stuck in the past, of refusing to accept the confident woman she was becoming. Her mother and sister tried to interject. "But the debt, Anna, the secrecy." I held up a hand. It wasn't their turn yet. Right now, it was about Anna. I let her build her entire case, brick by brick, until her fortress of logic was standing tall. Then, and only then, did I pick up my hammer. "Anna," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "I've listened to you, and you've made a very eloquent case for your autonomy. And I don't disagree. It is your body. It is your choice. But I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to be really honest with me. What is it that you're trying to fix?" She blinked. It was the first crack in the armor. "I'm not fixing anything," she replied, a little too quickly. "I'm improving. I'm enhancing." "Semantics?" I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Let's call it what it is. You look at yourself in the mirror and you see a flaw, a problem, and you pay a doctor to cut it away or fill it in. That's a fix. So I'll ask you again. What is the fundamental flaw in Anna that you're trying so desperately to erase?" The audience was silent. You could feel the tension ratcheting up. Her eyes started to dart towards her family, then back to me. I don't see a flaw," she stammered. "Don't you?" I pressed on. "Because your family has pictures, we have them too. Let's put the first one up." On the screen behind us, the photo of the young, vibrant, pre-surgery Anna appeared. "Tell me about that girl, Anna. What was wrong with her? Was her nose so offensive it needed to be broken and reset? Were her lips so thin they needed to be stung by 1,000 bees? Was her face so unacceptable that you had to spend, what is it now, over $60,000 to get rid of it?" Her face hardened. This was the attack she was expecting. People change their hair, they wear makeup, they go to the gym. "Stop," I said, cutting her off, but not aggressively. "Stop. That's a deflection. That's an intellectual argument. I'm not talking to your intellect right now. I'm talking to your heart. I'm talking to the 13-year-old girl who got called a name in the hallway and decided right then and there that she was broken." That's when the tears started. Not a lot, just a shimmer in her eyes. The fortress was starting to crumble. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. "I think you do," I said softly. "I think you've been running from that girl for 15 years. And every time you get a procedure, you think you're getting further away from her, but you're not. You're just carrying her with you in a more expensive package. That girl isn't your enemy, Anna. She's your prisoner, and you're the one holding the key." I turned to her mother and sister. "And you too," I said, my tone shifting from therapeutic to direct. "You love her, I have no doubt, but everything you've done has been about the behavior. You've been screaming at the fire, but you've been throwing gasoline on the embers. You've told her she's beautiful the way she was, which tells her she's ugly now. You've tried to force her into therapy, which makes her feel like a broken object to be repaired. You've made her feel judged, cornered, and controlled. You've been so busy trying to save the girl in that picture that you've completely invalidated the pain of the woman sitting right here." Her mother just broke down, sobbing into her hands. "We just want our daughter back," she cried. "She's right here," I said, my voice rising with intensity, pointing at Anna. "She has been here the whole time, screaming for help in a language you didn't understand. Every cut, every injection has been a cry for help. It's been her saying, 'Look at me, see how much pain I'm in. I have to physically alter my own face because I don't know how to tell you that I feel worthless inside.' That was the breakthrough. The moment the what finally gave way to the why. Anna was looking at her mother, and for the first time, she wasn't seeing a critic. She was seeing a woman who was terrified of losing her, and her mother was looking at her. And she wasn't seeing a defiant, out-of-control stranger. She was seeing her wounded child. The roles they had played for so long, the problem child and the worried parent, dissolved under the harsh lights of that stage. All that was left was a family drowning in pain, finally realizing they were all in the same water. That moment on stage, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the real work. A breakthrough is a powerful thing, but it's also fragile. It's like breaking ground for a new building. You've cleared away the debris, you've hit bedrock, but you haven't built anything yet. The easy part is over. Now comes the hard part, laying a new foundation, one brick at a time. For Anna and her family, the outcome wasn't a sudden, magical cure. Life doesn't work that way. It was a slow, painful, and deeply uncertain pivot towards a different way of being. We left them with a plan. That's crucial. You can't just open people up, expose all that raw nerve, and then say, all right, show's over, good luck. That's psychological malpractice. I connected Anna with a therapist in her hometown who specialized in body dysmorphic disorder and trauma. The key here was that this was for her, not for her family. The goal wasn't to stop the surgeries. The goal was to understand the pain that drove them. The surgeries were a symptom, not the disease. If we could begin to heal the disease, the symptoms would start to take care of themselves. For her mother and sister, the prescription was different. They needed family systems therapy. They had to learn a new way to communicate, a new way to show love that wasn't about fixing or controlling. They had to learn to validate Anna's feelings, even if they didn't understand her choices. They had to learn to say, I'm scared for you because I love you, instead of you're crazy for doing this. One is an expression of care. The other is a judgment. They had to mourn the loss of the girl in the photographs and start getting to know the woman who was actually there with all her complexities and pain. In the months that followed, we stayed in touch. My team does aftercare for every guest, and this case was one we watched closely. The first few weeks were rocky. Anna went to her first therapy session, but she was resistant. She still held on to the idea that her family had won. The old patterns were deeply ingrained. Her mother would call and ask, how was therapy? Which of course sounded to Anna like, is it fixed yet? It took them time to find a new rhythm. The first real sign of change was small, almost imperceptible. Anna had a consultation scheduled for a new procedure, something to do with her jawline. In the past, she would have gone, paid the deposit, and hidden it from everyone. This time, she canceled it. She didn't tell her family, she told her therapist. In their session, she admitted for the first time that the thought of the procedure didn't fill her with excitement, but with a sense of exhaustion. The constant pursuit of perfection was frankly tiring. It was the first time she had ever acknowledged that this art form was also a heavy burden. That was a huge step. She was beginning to separate her actions from her identity. Meanwhile, her mother and Claire were doing their own work. They learned to ask different questions. Instead of, what did you talk about in therapy? It became, how are you feeling today? They started sharing their own vulnerabilities. Her mother admitted how her own insecurities about aging made her hyper-focused on Anna's appearance. Claire confessed that her role as the perfect daughter was its own kind of prison, and sometimes she resented Anna's perceived freedom. They stopped being the caregivers and the patient and started being three women, each with their own struggles, trying to find their way back to each other. There was no big, dramatic moment where Anna looked in the mirror and suddenly loved what she saw. That's a Hollywood ending. The reality was much more nuanced. There were days she still felt that old, familiar self-loathing creep in. There were times she'd scroll through social media and feel the pull of that quick fix. The difference was now she had new tools. Instead of calling a surgeon's office, she might call her therapist. Or, in a truly remarkable shift, she might even call her sister, not for a lecture, but just to talk. About 6 months after the show, her mother sent me an email. It was short, but it said everything. She had attached a photo. It was a selfie of her, Claire, and Anna. They were out for a walk, no makeup, hair messy from the wind. They were smiling. And in Anna's eyes, that old defiant glare was gone. In its place was something quieter, something more settled. She hadn't reversed any of her surgeries. She still looked like the new Anna. But the person looking out from behind that face was different. She looked present. She looked at peace. This story, for me, was never about plastic surgery. It was about the masks we wear, literally and figuratively, to hide the parts of ourselves we believe are unlovable. Anna's journey was an extreme one, but her struggle is universal. It's the struggle to accept our own authentic selves in a world that's constantly telling us we need to be retouched, filtered, and improved. The outcome wasn't that she stopped wanting to change her appearance. It was that she started to build an identity that was strong enough to exist without the armor. The goal was never to put the old face back on. The goal was for her to finally be able to live comfortably in the one she had. And in that quiet, windy day selfie, it looked like she was finally starting to come home to herself.